autogynephilia and like trans. Should we
Mhm.
start off with like the envy/desire movie? I believe we both watched it.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm curious, what were your thoughts? Because I really enjoyed it, but I'm curious what your
Yeah,
perception, because
so
I think you had a
like
little
I
more time
thought
to
from
dig.
like a cinematography perspective and like a filmmaking perspective, it was shot very nicely. Like the sets were nice, the props and like just the presentation was really nice. But like
Hmm.
I felt like the message of a movie was almost like a 4chan shit post.
Hmm. And what do you think, like, what was the message that you received? And do you think it's similar to what the Amy like was creating to intend?
Um, well, something that I guess that we can touch on in this and that you've touched on before is sort of a true trans versus like trender or confused.
Mhm.
There's a lot of people who want to like web things that are considered like AGP into the fake trans slash gross category, whereas like so the character Ethan, I'm going to just use he him pronouns because he's effectively a man of the movie. He hasn't transitioned yet or anything. Um, it's a very like caricature version of autogynephilia.
Mm. Hmm. Absolutely, yeah. I would agree with that. Like, it's definitely not. I view autogynephia as a much more complex experience, and it's shown in like a comedic space. And I'm appreciating as someone who has like a very absurdly probably nuanced view of autogynephilia, and that's maybe not how like your average viewer is like viewing it. Because to me, I view Ethan's character as I think there's varying degrees of autogynephilia, and I think it can be like something that's purely sexual for some people, and and I think that's okay. And I think Ethan's character would be someone who it is purely sexual for, but they are perhaps confused, as in, as triggering as that probably sounds to be like, oh, they're just confused. But I do think that it's
Well,
a plausible scenario that someone can be confused between what's a fetish and like what's because pleasure is confusing. It's not like there's this fine line between like sexual pleasure, emotional, but like these things are all very integrated together. So I think it could be a much more profound
well,
experience than what is depicted, but
well. What I would say is, well, yeah, AGP is rather than like, well, also it's like depicted as in a very like yucky way. Like AGP is gross.
Mhm.
It's sort of tied with. Well, also I get we can talk about chasers since like I joked about you being a chaser in the thumbnail. Um,
I'm surprised I don't get that accusation more often, considering like probably at least like 70% of the people I interact with on Twitter are probably trans women. But I think I
Based.
just relate to people and appreciate. I think I relate to people who have had challenges in life broadly, um, and overcoming obstacles, and that's just something intrinsic to the trans experience. So I think maybe that's why disproportionately I tend to relate to them. And then just the topics I'm interested like are like fairly niche online spaces to start with. But yeah, I'm surprised I get called like a pervert shield or like a platform like from the like extreme turfs, and it's like that honestly makes me feel good because I'm like, all right, I don't want the extreme turfs to like me. So I feel like,
Yeah.
if the people I don't like me, that's probably a good sign that I'm not like veering too far into like being just pure like reactionary bullshit.
Uh, yeah, so AGP in the movie, it's whether it's like dysphoria or whether it's like just in the sexual domain, like it's depicted as being like a gross thing that needs to be
Hmm.
shunned. And like
I
there's
mean,
even like the Catholic trans woman who characterizes it in a
yeah,
very puritanical manner.
true. But part of me almost viewed that maybe I'm like giving it too much credit. Like I almost viewed it as like a meta like commentary like of how these things are perceived, and the way I interpreted Ethan's character wasn't with any sense of revulsion whatsoever. I found him to be almost kind of like dopey and like
Sure.
endearing, like, and maybe just not
A transvestite himbo.
basically, yeah. And I think that's I can understand why that portrayal is offensive because we don't have alongside it more human portrayals
Mhm.
of like people with AGP like anywhere that I can think of really, but I viewed it from a place of like poking like a lighthearted fun. Not I didn't think the message was like ew AGP, even though
Mhm.
I know there is that kind of like tension between like the HSTS and AGP and well, I should ask you, are you a believer in the two typology, the
Um,
Blanchardian or where because
I'm
sometimes it's mean
agnostic
for
to
people and
that. My
sometimes
opinion is that like Blanchard was onto something, and that's representative of something, potentially something underlying the psychology of trans, and that it can come from different places, but it's a very like rigid thing,
mm,
way of looking at it, and I'd say that like yeah we a lot of people will talk with like authority on various like psychological aspects of trans, like oh we know that they have the same brains as the gender they identify as, oh we, or Blanchard might be like, oh I have clear phallometric data
yeah,
saying
yeah.
that
Elementary
trans
data.
women's sexuality is identical to that of a straight guy like attracted to himself, or well to himself as a woman. um, well, something I'd also say regarding like AGP is like it does. Um, I think there's a reason why, well, why it's viewed with a lot of grossness in the trans community, not just by like the prototypical like HSTS dolls like
Mhm,
Amy,
mhm,
but like by a lot of like lesbian or bisexual trans women too. And something that is strong with like AGP is shame or self disgust.
mhm,
So like it's that's why I see like a lot of trans women like really mean to like cross dressers or like
mm.
femboys, because they see sort of a part of their history that grossed them out, and they're like, oh
Uh,
I was grossed out by who I was back then and you're doing the same thing, that reminds me of who I was, I hate you.
yeah, that makes sense. That's pretty much how why anyone hates anyone is that experience of like, you remind me of something about me that I don't like that I haven't really reckoned with, so I'm gonna project a bunch of angry energy at you to destroy you from my field of vision. Like, but it's pretty toxic. I mean, so do you think AGP, like, do you think that describes your experience or part of your experience, or
I'd
do you relate
say
to that term?
I'd say that autogynephilia is probably in part component or the underlying mechanism for my
Mhm.
gender identity, and probably component to my sexuality. I'd say
Mhm.
so.
And so you would, without hesitation, like self-identify as AGP, like with unironically.
Uh,
And
well,
that sounded like bitchy and weird the way I said it, but I'm just curious because I know sometimes people will like, like I'll call myself like a chase or, like,
sure.
kind of like play up the labels that people put
I
on me.
play it up on Twitter like, oh, look at me, I'm super
Exactly.
duper
So it's like,
AGP, but like in an honest like sense, I do feel like it's quite possible that autogynephilia is in fact component to
yeah.
my sexuality and gender identity, either in whole or in part.
But yeah, I was just saying, I think it is unfortunate that it's so hard to have these conversations, especially with something that can help you understand yourself better.
Yes.
That to me can only be a positive thing. And we need to let go of the judgments and moralizing around human sexuality that aren't logical, really. I mean, a certain level of moralizing sexuality makes sense from like an evolutionary perspective. But I do think that we can have like a healthy whole society that has a space for people to whatever degree identifying as AGP, whether it's just on the fetish side or if it's more descriptive of who they see themselves as a person and they choose to live, full time like as a trans woman. I
Uh,
would like to see a space for like all those different
Something I
representations.
do like to object to is the characterization of fetish. I consider it like a
Mm,
sexuality in the same realm as like heterosexuality, bisexuality, homosexuality. Like autogynephilia is like its own sort of a sexuality in its own right, or it's like
I could. Yeah, I actually just ordered Phil Illy's book on like the auto heterosexual because he is the one who kind of like first opened my eyes to seeing it as like yeah, not like a fetish, but yeah, more of like an actual like legitimate orientation that's you are born with, or who knows how these things happen, but it definitely exists. The only reason I say fetish is to describe on the
Well,
say if
maybe
there's a
the
scale of
expression of it
AGP,
can be somewhat fetishistic.
or like maybe someone can just be like like a straight guy could be like mildly AGP and like I don't know if I'm explaining it. Like I'm just saying there should be a space for even if it is just a fetish to someone. I think that's okay, but I would not describe AGP itself as a fetish.
That
But